Canada may have one of the world's most important trade hubs, yet almost nobody talks about it. Hidden in a remote corner, it moves goods with incredible speed and efficiency. Here is why this place is becoming one of Canada's biggest advantages. In a remote stretch of northern British Columbia that looks on a map like the far edge of the world, it is not Vancouver, it is not Toronto, it is not any of the cities that appear in conversations about global trade infrastructure. And yet, in 2022 alone, more than $60 billion in trade moved through this harbor. Megaships sailing from Asia traverse the shortest and fastest route across the Trans-Pacific, saving days of travel time compared to alternatives. They arrive at North America's deepest natural harbor, a port that stays ice-free year-round, and connect immediately to a rail network so efficient it delivers cargo to Chicago in 4 days. That is faster than trains from Los Angeles, faster than trains from Seattle, from a remote patch of the Canadian Northwest that most of the world has never thought about. This is the port of Prince Rupert, and what makes it extraordinary is not just what it is today. It is how old the story behind it actually is, and how many layers of history had to align before any of this became possible. The modern trade corridor begins with geography that no human being designed. The Skina River stretches 360 miles from the interior plateau of British Columbia to the Pacific Ocean, cutting through the Coast Mountains, a range stretching 1,000 miles across the continent's northwestern edge, whose peaks and glaciers form a barrier between the Pacific and the interior that has almost no natural passages. The Skina is one of a handful of major rivers that created a rare breach through that barrier, a wide, navigable valley through otherwise impenetrable mountain terrain. Anyone moving goods between the Pacific coast and the interior of North America had, for thousands of years, only a small number of viable routes. The Skina was one of the most important. That geographic reality produced something that preceded the railway, the canneries, and the container terminal by thousands of years. The Skina watershed is one of the largest and most important salmon watersheds in British Columbia, covering an area greater than Switzerland. It is also one of North America's last fully intact salmon watersheds. The river's abundance created the economic foundation from which everything that followed was built. Trade networks stretching deep into the continent's interior used the Skina as a highway, a vital east-west link, connecting coastal and inland economies across a region that later historians called the Grease Trails, named for the Ulichin oil that was among the most prized goods moving along those routes. At Kitzilas Canyon, about 10 miles upstream from the modern city of Terrace, the Skina does something of significant consequence. It narrows into a tight canyon with prominent rock outcroppings on either side. That narrowing created a choke point, a place where any trader moving goods along the river, either by canoe or by foot, had to pass through a defined and controllable space. The Kitzilas people understood this. They positioned themselves as gatekeepers of that canyon, collecting tolls from traders moving in both directions, coastal goods like herring eggs, seaweed, and halibut flowing inland, and mountain goods like mountain goat, moose meat, and berries flowing toward the coast. Petroglyphs, archaeological evidence, and oral histories point to Kitzilas' control of the canyon dating back at least 5,000 years. 5,000 years of toll collection on a trade route that megaships from Asia now complete in 4 days to Chicago. The railway arrived last. In 1903, Charles Melville Hayes, president of the Grand Trunk Railway, took on the task of building a line connecting Canada's rail system to a more northern port, something closer to Asia, with better access to the Trans-Pacific shipping lanes. The coastal rainforest of the Pacific Northwest presented an obvious challenge: dense, wet, dominated by massive trees, and backed immediately by the coast mountains. The solution was the same one the Kitzilas people had used for 5,000 years. Follow the river. The Skina had already done the work of clearing a passage through the mountains. The railway engineers simply put track alongside it. Construction ran from 1906 to 1914, 8 years, through terrain that would otherwise have been impassable. Hayes never lived to see it completed. He went down with the Titanic in 1912. The line was completed under his successors and successfully opened a faster connection to Asia than anything previously available on the continent. It was costly. Between 1917 and 1923, it was merged with 3 other lines and nationalized into a single government-owned company, Canadian National Railway. That company survives to this day. Privatized in 1995, and now annually moves approximately $184 billion in goods between North American and Asian markets, carrying approximately 300 million tons of cargo per year. Each individual train carries the equivalent of 300 semi-trucks of freight. These trains run constantly. The port of Prince Rupert today reflects the culmination of all those layers. North America's deepest natural harbor, reaching up to 115 feet deep. The continent's first ship to rail container terminal, moving cargo directly from sea to track without intermediate steps. Terminals for grain, coal, wood pellets, and liquid petroleum gas, in addition to containers. One of the fastest growing marine gateways on the continent. And now, the Port Authority has activated the largest construction phase in its history, investing $3 billion Canadian dollars to expand capacity and diversify cargo at a moment when the global trade conversation has shifted dramatically towards supply chain security and route diversification. The timing of that $3 billion Canadian dollars expansion matters in the current geopolitical environment. Global trade policy is undergoing a structural realignment. Supply chains that were built around cost efficiency are being rebuilt around reliability and political security. The United States and China are competing for influence over global logistics infrastructure. Canada's trade conflict with Washington has accelerated the diversification of Canadian export routes. And the port of Prince Rupert, closer to Asia than any other North American port, connected to the fastest continental rail corridor, in a politically stable jurisdiction with deep water and year-round ice-free operation, is positioned precisely where the new trade architecture needs an anchor. What the railway engineers of 1903 understood, and what the Kittilas gatekeepers understood 5,000 years before them, is the same insight. Geography creates opportunity, but only for those willing to build the infrastructure to capture it. The Skina cuts through the coast mountains because rivers find the lowest path. The railway followed because engineers followed the river. The port grew because deep water and ice-free conditions made it operationally superior. And the $3 billion Canadian dollars expansion is happening now because the global trade environment has finally caught up to what the geography made possible from the beginning. Prince Rupert has 12,300 people. It has bakeries and coffee shops and a sushi restaurant where the chef sources every ingredient from BC fisheries within 20 feet of the ocean. It has salmon and halibut and black cod, and the old North Pacific cannery built in 1889, 25 years before the railway even arrived. It has a totem pole raised in a ceremony attended by the Kittilas community, a 36-foot pole carved by master carver Stan Bevan and his apprentices in 7 months, telling the story of the Salmon Prince, a story carried in oral tradition for generations about honoring what the river provides.